Man like Mark Sullivan, the Warrior Cell. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bead. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Welcome to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I am the Beeve. Episode 13, Dale Rehberg today.
Lucky 13,
Lucky
all right.
13, Dale.
I like this interview, actually. This is a pretty good one.
Don't you like all the interviews, Mark?
Of course I do.
We've had some pretty stellar interviews leading up to 13 here.
Well, this one is going to be Lucky 13.
Okay, so Dale Rehberg.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Dale.
And so Dale actually was a guy who I lived with when
you lived with Dale?
Yeah, I lived with Dale.
How was that?
It was awesome. He's an amazing guy. He was always a really nice guy. I think anyone who knows Dale Rehberg will tell you what a nice guy he is.
Who was cleaner, you or Dale?
I don't know. That was when I lived in like a 2-bedroom apartment with 11 dudes. Dale was one of those dudes, but he was on the road a lot for Ride Snowboards.
Right.
Ride had just started. He talks about Joyride. He was a pro for Joyride, coming from Wisconsin, then moved to Colorado, Breckenridge, and that's where I met him. Or actually, no, I met him before that, even at summer snowboard camp. I was an aspiring rider. We both were. And so, anyhow, I've known Dale since we were teenagers.
Now, Dale went on to become kind of like a pretty big pro rider all through those years, right?
He was like a super pro in ads and magazines all the time, interviews, traveling the world. He had quite a career in the sport of snowboarding as a professional athlete.
And he had it, so this career was going pretty good, and then he kind of just ended, or he just stopped?
He retired. He just decided he would retire, and then he took a job at Silent Snowboards, working in the warehouse packing boxes.
That's interesting, going from like being, at the top of your sport, being the guy that everyone looks at, to being the guy and then putting boards in boxes and shipping them off to people.
Yeah, and he was like making six figures easy, right? Jeez. As a pro rider, he had like stock options with Ride back in the day when they went public, and so yeah, most people would think that was a step backwards, but for Dale, it was actually a step forward because he learned a lot, right? There's packing boxes, then he's had a full career, and so he went on to become the marketing director for Flow. And so he was the marketing director for Flow Snowboards for a number of years, and today he is a sales rep for Flow. A little bit of a different role, but also rewarding for Dale Rehberg.
All right, well, should we go ahead and listen to your interview?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, coming at you, episode 13.
Dale Rehberg.
Hello.
Hey, Dale. This is Mark.
What's up? Hi, Mark.
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good, buddy.
Is this a good time?
Perfecto.
Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to do a little interview with you today. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you loud and clear, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good to go, dude.
Okay, cool. So, today I'm joined by Dale Rehberg, and Dale is undoubtedly one of the legends of the sport, kind of one of the guys who led the charge in the jib movement, but also a guy I've known since I was a teenager. So, we took two different tracks through the sport, but we're both still involved today. And I guess we'll start out with, how did you know that you wanted to be a snowboarder? Like, when did you decide for yourself that that this is something you wanted to pursue with your life?
Gosh, man, that takes it way back. I'm guessing it was probably the summer of like 1987 or something, maybe 86, when I first saw snowboarding. I was in the mall in my town, and some guy had a kiosk set up at the mall with a snowboard video playing. And at that time I water skied and I skated and I snow skied and did things like that, but I didn't really know what snowboarding was. I'd never saw it. I'd never been, my mind hadn't been opened yet. And I saw it on television, and in that moment, I seriously looked at my dad and like, Dad, that's what I want to do.
Really?
And I
so
think
from the very love at first sight.
Love at first sight. And I think that, being a parent now, if my kid says it to me, you kind of laugh at that shit, but it was a wholehearted, like, that's what I want to do. Not that's what I want to do this winter, or that's what I think would be fun to try. It was like, that's what I want to do.
So,
and
okay, go ahead.
It was just it, man. It was like I saw it, and I think it was Jake Burton riding the Pow Field or something. I don't know what movie it was. It's probably a Burton movie, but it was just so inspiring to me, and it was like freedom. I saw, I was like, holy shit, that's total freedom, and that was it. That was the end of the book.
So what was your dad's reaction when, you must have been 14 or 13 or 15 years old, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
What was your dad's reaction when you were like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to be?
He was like, that's really cool. He called it shushing, right? That guy's shushing. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, it's killer. And, at that time, the guy told us it was Burton boarding, because it wasn't really snowboarding yet.
Yeah.
It was Burton boarding.
Sure.
And he was pretty into it. He's like, well, we got to figure out how to get one of these things. And you know what I mean? The typical Midwest guy, like, got to figure it out. But his reaction was wide open. It wasn't a negative, like, nah, it ain't happening kind of deal. It was like, cool, let's try it. Let's figure it out.
So then you got yourself a snowboard. You started riding. When did you have like your first sponsor? Who was your first sponsor, and how did you get that first sponsor?
Got it. Yeah. So I ended up getting a board, started riding. There was like three of us, really tight group, and then a couple more people from the next town up that we all kind of ended up riding together for the first winter. Mm-hmm. And that first winter, I was pretty gung ho on figuring out how to get sponsored. We were doing contests. The Midwest had a contest series. So I went out and took some pictures, hitting a jump, and started to send pictures out to, the brands. At that time was basically Sims, Burton, Avalanche, and Barfoot.
Yep.
If I recall, that's what I knew. And that end of that winter, I got sponsored by Burton.
Really? So Burton was your first sponsor. What kind of tricks were you doing in those photos, like that first year, like to get sponsored? This is going way back in time. So just to give people a perspective on what it took to get sponsored back in those days.
It was basically like straight airs off of kickers and, mute grabs, stale fish grabs, methods, shit like that. And it was also your style too. So, at that exact moment in time was when the first Transworld snowboarding came out. I think ISM may have been out previous to that, but I didn't know it. So you're looking at Transworld's first issue, and you're like, this is so killer. How can I kind of emulate that? How can I take my skateboard style? And so you're doing these kind of corny moves, what people would think of today. I still think that they're better than most shit, but just straight airs with style, slob grabs, and kind of, it's the skate plus Transworld snowboarding meshing in my mind.
Right. So, people associate you with a group of guys from the Midwest, or at least I do anyway, because I've known you a long time. But how did you meet, like, Rowan Rogers and Nate Cole and Jake Blattner? How did you meet those guys?
Right. So, Rowan and I's story is just a pretty classic story. We were neighbors since we were born. So we went to daycare, preschool together before, like 3 years old, we were hanging out. So Rowan was an immediate neighbor of mine, and we were friends since forever. And once we got into snowboarding, like I said, that first winter, there was this Midwest snowboard series that was put on. And you'd go to all the little ski resorts around Wisconsin and Iowa and shit like that. In doing that, you met the only other snowboarders. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there wasn't a million snowboarders. So you'd show up, there'd be 50 or 60 people there, and it happened to be Joe and Jeff Curtis, Nate Cole, Jake Blattner, Dave Hubach, and like Randy Kelleher. And dude, the list goes on of this whole entire Midwest group of people who ended up becoming pretty successful in the sport, So it started when we were super young, and we all would have met, and then we'd hang out on the weekends. And then as we got old enough that we could drive and our parents thought we were responsible enough, we'd go hang out with each other and shit. And that's kind of how it started.
A lot of kids have like pressure when they're kind of driving, graduating high school to go on to college. And your group of guys went to Breckenridge. How did you decide to really kind of make that next leap from being a Midwest competitor, winning contests in the Midwest, to like, okay, I'm going to go to Breckenridge, which at that time was like the epicenter maybe, or one of the epicenters of snowboarding, certainly. Yeah. How did you guys make that decision?
Well, I can speak for myself on that, and it really started, with the Transworld Snowboarder magazines, and Breckenridge used to hold the Worlds, which at that time was like the sickest half pipe contest when no one had half pipe. So you would see, we were fed that, right, through the magazines, and you're like, that's where I want to go, right? Because that just looks like shit. I don't know. It was just so attractive, right? It was like beautiful weather, perfect half pipe, cool town. And then some of the people that I had met in the Midwest, like Fred Yoder and Steve Whitner, those dudes had bailed out to Breckenridge a few years earlier. The shop that myself and Rowan rode for, called the Alt in Minneapolis, John Baugh and Bruce Erickson, and those dudes had got to Breckenridge to the World. So it was just kind of this thing that was fed to you. Like, Breckenridge is the shit, man. Let's get out there. So when I graduated high school, I went to Mount Hood for that summer. This was 91. I'd already been going there for camps for years, but I went to Mount Hood with Roan and my other friend Tom Meyerhoff, and we all talked. And that summer I met Chris Swires and Jeff Brushy and all these dudes from the East, like where you're from. And, getting to talk with Chris Swires, he's like, dude, I'm moving to Breckenridge. We're like, we're moving to Breckenridge. And so we all like, okay, we're going to meet in the A Basin parking lot on this day, No cell phones. And literally I went home from that summer, told my dad I'm moving to Breckenridge, and I'm meeting friends that I just met in a parking lot, and that was it, dude.
What was your dad's reaction when you're like, I'm going to go meet people in a parking lot somewhere thousands of miles or 1,000 miles away?
My parents were pretty lenient with that stuff, so his reaction was like, well, what are you going to do out there? I'm like, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to go out there, get a job, and I'm going to snowboard. And remember, at that time, I was sponsored by Burton, and there was the possibility of becoming a professional snowboarder, Like, it wasn't as if I was just going out there to cruise. Like, I had some momentum behind what I was doing, support. My dad saw it. My mom saw it. They knew I probably wasn't ever going to do good in school, so they're like, let this kid get out there and experience real life. And we just ripped it. And at the same time, Rowan moved out there, Nate moved out there, Jake moved out there. God, like, and then you meet all the other homies that moved out there from like the East Coast and this and that. And dude, that was it. That was the best. 1991, 93, 94 was Breck world,
Yeah. So how did you switch from Burton to Joyride? Because I know that you were one of the really early guys on the Joyride team when that was like the hot thing, in snowboarding.
So that happened that same summer of 91 when I graduated high school and went out to Mount Hood. So we were up there pipe digging at, God, I don't even know what camp it was. I don't know. One of the camps were like digging pipe and just groveling around and riding, and met this dude named Tom Nordwall, who is epic human. And I think Jay Jameson, I think that's his name. I don't know. One of the
Chris Jameson. Jenna Jameson is more in the different career path.
Chris Jameson and some other dudes. They were talking about starting this new company called Joyride, and at that time, I want to think I was a pretty progressive rider, and caught their attention, and started talking with Tom Nordwall, and he was like, "Hey, we're going to start this thing. We want you to be on the team." And I was like, "Well, a little bit weird, but let's check it out." And over the summer, the conversations evolved, and by the time I moved to Colorado, it was getting pretty real, and it was hard. Like, I didn't really see myself progressing as fast as I'd wanted with the Burton crew.
Mm-hmm.
And with this Joyride avenue, they're like, yeah, we want to give you a pro model and all stuff, which was like a dream. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. And they put together a phenomenal team, and I switched from Burton to Joyride. And that was the winter of 91, I think, 92. And that's how it went down.
And so, you know, back then the boards kind of had bigger noses. They were just more unwieldy. And then your crew of guys from the Midwest kind of started cutting down the boards, not beyond the effective edge, but cutting off the noses of your boards. And then that kind of resulted in your pro model, the Eldorado, which basically all snowboards still look like today. Can you walk us through that evolution?
Yeah, so you're right. At that time, snowboarding, most snowboards had really long, drawn-out noses and kind of weird short tails. They were really directional, right? There wasn't really anything where you were centered, stanced, and kind of skatey feeling. And when Joyride's boards came out, you know, it was myself, Roan, Jake, and Nate living in this little studio. And these boards came, and we were all looking at them, and they had these giant noses, which, looking back now, were probably pretty freaking sweet for like power riding and something I would love today. But at that time, not just me, but we're all looking at it going, dude, these noses are huge, you know, let's freaking cut them down. And I think Roan was the first one to grab a dinner plate and just trace a line across his board. And just remember, dude, this company had just started. These were the first samples that were made, and they gave them to us. And I shit you not, the next morning, those things had no noses, and kind of all hell broke loose. Like, what the fuck? You know, like,
yeah, modifying your sponsorship board.
Yeah, they just came out with so. But it was just a moment like that, because once you realize, like, oh wow, this is something totally different. The boards looked directional. They were stubby, way less swing weight, and that was kind of our whole MO. And also keep in mind, at that time, stances didn't really go wider than 18 or 19 inches maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, let's figure out how to get wider stances, like shoulder width, you know? So we just started going to like True Value hardware and shit and getting T-bolts and drilling your bindings, hope you get it right, put the T-bolt through the base, cover it with wax, and now you got a wider stance, a shorter board. And that kind of started some shit.
Were they upset with you? Were they upset that you were doing like modifying their because they must have thought that out pretty in depth of their design of their board, and then they send you this board and you're just like, okay, your design's okay, but boom, we're gonna T-bolt it and cut it down and we're gonna totally modify it.
I think initially there was some heavy resistance, but it was just a matter of time. Like within a week or so of riding these boards like this, and dude, people were tripping, right? So the guys at Joyride were like, dude, we might be onto something. And one of the guys who was a key player in the brand and with all of the team and rec was Andy Schatz. And he was like, well, dude, let's make a pro model that is that shape. And that happened to be mine and Matt Smith's shared pro model called the Eldorado. And it was, I would say, as one of the first boards. I can't say it was the first board, but it probably was one of the first boards. And to have that shape, and it changed shit, you know?
I would say it did. I mean, I'd say that a lot of snowboards today can trace their shape and design, really the twin shape, you know, can trace its roots back to that board.
Yeah, in terms of like shorter, stumpy twin, yeah, because remember, like Barfoot had the 161 twin, but it was just different because they were long, you know what I mean? It was like elongated kind of powder shapes where this was something new where it was about swing weight and shortening the board up, and it was for totally different riding style. I mean, we came from the Midwest where it's just rock and ice hard all the time to Breckenridge, which is not rock and ice all the time, but it's kind of just big, giant Midwest hills, you know, long, kind of not super steep stuff. So this jib kind of style started, and it was you know, with the influence of the Rankwits and the Roaches and the Slasniks and those cats on the videos, but just making it our own. And it was a really killer time, you know? A lot of great shit happened then.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Beav here. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please consider donating at patreon.com/The Snowboard Project. You too can help us create an independent voice in snowboard media. We're not sponsored by anyone except you. Patreon.com/The Snowboard Project.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about like the advent of street jibbing, because I would say that crew also not only created these modern boards, but also were like the first guys going out at night and hitting rails and doing that. Your crew, basically. And how did that come about?
That's what happened. Dude, I don't even know how it came about other than the sheer passion for snowboarding and being a teenager. So, you know, we're 18, living alone in Breckenridge, snowboarding all we can, working where we can, right? Just groveling, but loving it so much when you'd come home from whatever you were doing during the day, whether it was riding or work, whatever, and we would just keep our boots on and be like, let's go. And we'd go to like happy hour, find all the places you can get like free potato skins and shit and eat, and then roll out and try to find handrails or other things to ride around town when the ski resort was closed. And this whole handrail movement, I remember, dude, these wooden handrails at Breck, like the first time I'd ever gone out with Roan Nate and Chad and Joe Dubs and these boys. Dude, and it was groundbreaking at that point. I mean, we had saw this stuff in skating for years, and you're like, can we do this on snowboards and like not kill ourselves? And dude, it worked, and it just became this thing we did every night, and it changed shit. I mean, when you're riding on the hill, we were doing the rainbow trees and the logs and the jib bonks and the Copper Mountain, like Mario Run and stumps and manhood and all that shit. But then taking it at night to actual handrails on like in town streets was something you never really saw, you know?
Yeah.
And it was fresh, dude. It was new, and in our minds, it was skating on snow. You know, you're like, dude, this is it. This is killer.
And so
that's how it went down.
How did you guys start getting filmed? Because I know you were riding, you had this passion, but you guys were riding like essentially you were living a snowboard life where it's like you weren't necessarily pursuing being filmed or whatever. How did that come about where someone started filming you and then you became a star of Mac Dog movies and other movies,
right.
You know, in that Joyride era?
Well, I think when all that was going down that winter of 91, you know, word got out that this shit's going down in Breck. And it was probably going down in Vail too. And, you know, there was this crew, but this shit's going down out there. And we lived, one of the dudes of the posse that lived with us was Steve Blakely. So Steve was a rider for Barfoot and such a killer dude and lived with us as well, like same flat of the ghetto, we called it.
Yeah,
and he got a camera. Yeah, you were there. And, dude, Joe Bogenside.
Yeah.
All the boys.
Yeah.
And he started to film to make a movie, which he'd never done. He's like, I'm going to do it. But we had all known Mac Dog, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't remember when he actually came and we met him, but that winter he came out there to film us because he'd heard this shit, right? And I don't know if it was from like the boys down in Boulder, the Twist Boys, you know, Justin Hoisnack and the Bush Brothers and Amani King and Troy and just that whole crew of maybe somehow he heard and came out and started filming. And that's how essentially we all got in his flicks, you know, from that winter. And then like he brought Gooch out and this stuff. And I think Rankwit and the boys came out and they were doing things with Fall Line Films, and it just started to snowball, you know, but Mac Dog really brought it to the light. And then Blakely had his video, I think it's called The Seventh Year, that came out that same winter. And then another friend of ours from back in the Midwest, John Creek, came out and he made a movie called The Flying Circus. Dude, and all this shit started going down and it just started to build this momentum. And it became the thing to do and kind of became what snowboarding was for many years. unfortunately, but that's what it became.
Well, snowboarding's a diverse thing, and so there isn't really one way to do it right or wrong. And I think that, what you guys were doing was being creative, and that was the important thing, maybe. Not the fact that, you were jibbing necessarily, but the fact that you guys were taking this skateboarding and marrying it to snowboarding in a way that hadn't been done before that.
Yeah, it was natural, dude. There wasn't like a lot of thought and effort. It was just a natural progression from being from the flats of the Midwest to, hey, we now have a bigger playground. What can we do?
So when did you start getting paid where you're like, wow, this could actually be a job? Because at that point you were working at night or working during the day, working some days as little as possible basically to survive, and snowboarding as much as possible. When did you start getting paid to snowboard?
That all started, so that winter, the Joyride winter, the 91-92 winter was killer. And then the next winter, so it would have been the 92-93, that spring, summer, there was talks of a new brand coming on the market, and that was Ride Snowboards, right? I remember I was I think it was the ASR trade show that used to happen down in San Diego, and my buddy Russell Winfield was there, and dude, this guy Tim Polk started this new company, and Tim came from Burton, so it had cred, and he's like, I'm on the team, and Jason Ford, and when I heard Jason Ford's on the Ride team, I'm like, this is real, because Ford was someone that I had looked up to on the Burton team, you know what I mean, when it was those dudes. And it ended up just kind of falling in my lap where Ride wanted Roan on their team. Ride wanted me on their team. I think it was Cersei, Russell, Jake, Jason, and then they had the racer Mike Kildevald because they didn't make race boards for the first couple years. Yep. But once that happened, that's when it got real. They had backing, they had money, they had a plan. Not that Joyride didn't have any of those. They just couldn't operate successfully, from my mind, being an 18, 19-year-old kid going, dude, I see myself in videos and I'm now showing up in magazines and I'm not even making shit. And now I have an opportunity to do this, and boom, switched over to Ride Snowboards, and that's when it got real. So that was the winter of 92, 93.
Right. And so, were you already being recognized on the streets? When was the first time that someone was like, no way, you're Dale Rehberg? And you're like, who, me?
I don't remember. I don't remember when that first happened, but it was probably like that next winter in Japan or something, we had been, or at least I had been in a few Dogger movies. I was showing up consistently in all the snowboard mags with Ride behind, with the push and the advertising, and then the trips to Japan, right? You do distributor trips. The whole team would go over there and, snowboard and do some contests for a couple of weeks and then go to the trade show and head home. I think that was the first time when I got kind of shocked. I'm like, holy shit, people know who I am from snowboarding. That's weird. And that was a reality check situation for sure.
Right, and then that lasted for a number of years where you were pretty much a household name in the world of snowboarders.
Yeah, I had a nice career. I pulled the plug in 2000. I think it was 2000, just before 2000. And there was a bunch of stuff that was happening, had a killer career, loved it, did great, traveled the world. But, dude, Ride Snowboards at that time had kind of went through this phase of becoming a public company, blowing up, becoming a starlet on the stock market, and then all of a sudden everything just stopped, dude. The whole thing just changed, just like a typical stock market story, I guess, right? The rise and fall, right? So as it fell and it was over and it started to change, there were so many things changing internally, and I know my contract was probably one of the first to come up, and when my contract came up, it was like, no renew. So that was a reality, right? Hey, you can't do this forever, but at that point, I probably could have been the guy to pick up the phone and start to grovel and call companies and try to keep going, but I was 28 at that time, and I was watching young Peter Lines and young JP Walkers and young Jeremy Jones, Street Jeremy Jones, has come up. And I'm like, dude, I'm not keeping up with these cats. These guys are gnarly. And then there's the group under them, the Joey McGuires and this, that. And I'm like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do in my life, you know? Like, I could go down the path and continue being the snowboarder. And at that, you got to remember, dude, this is like, emails probably hadn't even came out yet at that point. It was just starting. Right. There wasn't social media. There wasn't snowboard agents to help you. You were just fucking in an island on your own. You had to figure out what to do, you know?
Yeah, and like, that era was like a complete whirlwind, I'm sure, because it's like the ride, rise and fall. Did you guys, like, you had your crew of guys that you knew, but was there anybody like mentoring you guys and giving you advice and being like, hey, one day this will come to an end, so think about that too?
Hell no, dude. And the only person who was any form of reality check for me was my mom and dad. Really? They were like, save your money, right? Take X amount of your money you get each month and put it in a bank, save it, and be prepared because you're not going to do this forever.
Right.
And I kind of laughed and I'm like, I'll follow you on the save the money part and this and that, but I'm going to do this forever. That's what my mind was set, dude. There was no one telling you the pitfalls ahead, right?
Right. It seems like you guys were like going, partying hard too.
And yeah, dude, it was.
It's like every time you would go on like a tour, you'd roll up to every shop and like they were waiting for weeks for you to come, and then they were like, "Okay, we're going to show you how we party," and like they'd have like the biggest parties for you guys, and that was like what, night after night for like years.
That was constant for like 8 years, and it was when your season stopped here, you'd go to like New Zealand and keep doing it. It was radical shit, bro. And you don't have anyone guiding you. You don't have any financial advisors, nothing. You're just hoping you're doing it right. And to be honest with you, I didn't even think about it. You're just going, right? You're like, but it ends, right? It ends.
Yeah. And when how do you avoid the pitfalls of like, I don't know, becoming an alcoholic or being addicted to drugs or something like that? And we saw some people kind of go down that road, and you seem like you avoided like the majority, or at least you always kept your focus on the riding to some degree.
Yeah, I think, God, man, I think it's just personality, you know, when it comes down to like choices at that level. I mean, being a teenager in your early 20s and having access to, you know, a travel agent to go anywhere in the world at any moment at a time and be anywhere you want to be, and being able to say, I'm not fucked up from that is pretty commendable. And I think it's personality, dude. Like, you just got to kind of have your focus and, you know, make decisions. I had a lot of friends who didn't make good decisions and unfortunately were pretty jacked at a lot of times. And I saw that and I'm like, I ain't going to be that guy. You know what I mean? I'm not going down that path. And I think, you know, I smoked weed and nowadays it's legal. Back then it wasn't, but that was kind of the extent of how crazy I got, other than booze. But with the booze, I was able to not become an alcoholic. You know, I still enjoy alcohol today, but I'm by far not losing my marbles somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of strong will, personality, and seeing your friends fail, right? And going, oh, that had to hurt. Ooh, right? Like, shit, don't do that. But regardless, I'm here today. I got kids of my own, and I can look back at what I did and what I didn't do and try to educate and move forward, you know?
Sure. So now, like, let's go back to, like, when you pulled the plug on being or attempting to be, you know, instead of milking your career till the last, you know, till the end, you pulled the plug, and what did you do after that?
Yeah, so God, dude, when it ended, when the contract was over, and I made the conscious decision, I'm not going to pursue being a professional snowboarder, right? I want to go figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I got to figure out what I want to do for work. Being in the industry forever, I had many opportunities to go work for some cool brands, some not cool, some cool, but regardless, the fact of the matter is it was a free education for me, right? I started, the first thing I did, dude, I started working in a warehouse for Silence snowboards and straight line water ski ropes and Neptune wakeboards. Like, I worked in the warehouse. I didn't know anything else. I think I had a really good marketing sense because of the opportunities that Ride had given me, starting Capel Clothing, coming up with marketing campaigns and ad directions and things like that. I had a lot of that vision from having that, being able to be in that situation. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how to do anything. So started in a warehouse and worked packing boxes and figuring out, oh, wow, there's a system, there's an inventory system, there's part numbers. Like, I didn't know that shit, and just those baby steps, incrementally learning through a company up into the marketing department and then understanding that and how it all worked. Like, dude, it was amazing. It's like an amazing education that I was getting paid to do, right?
Right, and it seems like you were probably making, I don't know, six figures probably in those days, which was a lot of money if you're, a kid coming up into snowboarding and as a pro rider. Was it hard? Was it a tough nut to swallow to go to an hourly laborer who got paid a couple of dollars an hour more than minimum wage, let's say, to work in a warehouse?
Yeah, it was humbling. But I'm a humble dude. I don't expect anything. I work for everything I've ever had. And like I said, I made the conscious decision, like I'm sure I could have continued down the path and made six figures for a few more years, but I knew there'd just be a hard stop at one point, and it just wouldn't work. And it's like the famous song, dude, it's better to burn out than fade away. So that burned out for 8 fucking years, and it was like, I'm out. I just chopped it off and sucked it up and did it. And I had savings. I had bought a house already. And, I had done things with my money that I was able to not completely freak out. Mm-hmm. But it's a pretty tough reality check, right? You're like, okay, this is different, but how do I get back to where I was? That's kind of my mentality, was like, I'm here today and I need to learn this. And how long is it going to take me to get to where I was? And what's that path look like? And that's how I looked at it,
Right. Right.
How am I going to do this?
So then what happened after Silence? You were packing boxes. What was the next step?
Yeah, I did. I mean, Silence was a few years, man. It was like, I don't know for sure, but I would say it was like maybe 3 or 4 years, I'm thinking. And at that point, the brand was acquired or something away from its parent company, and it moved to Southern California. And I was living up in Seattle at the time, and we had the option, myself and my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, to move down with the brand and continue running it. And we did that. It got me down here to San Clemente, California. And that pittered out after a few years. The snowboard industry went through some really hard times. Numbers were down. Financing went away, which are valuable lessons no one was teaching me, right? You had to learn this shit.
Yep.
And at that point, I had an opportunity to go with this startup company called Alliance, which was kind of a mid-price point snowboard clothing brand that was starting up. I went there and worked with them for about 7 years, from the marketing position to sales position to running the company, and then entering the reality realm of a financial crisis in 2007 and understanding what that means as a business. So all these things were just kind of life lessons and stepping stones, and you navigate your way around it and through it and up it and down it, and continue to work hard, and you just pray and hope that it freaking keeps going.
Hey Mark.
Yeah.
Would you say like growing things organically could be likened a lot to like growing things organically?
Yeah. Like, what do you got in mind?
I'm just saying, like, because we're trying to grow this.
Let's say, for instance, tomatoes.
Oh, yeah. So like tomatoes need sunlight, and
like
they
if you
need
buy
some water, and they need some soil.
Right. No, I have friends who would like they would actually like buy these lights, and they would grow tomatoes indoors organically.
Okay. So can we liken the lights and our fake sunlight to Patreon subscribers?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you will be our metal halide lights.
You too can be our grow lights. So why don't you help us grow? If you're interested in helping us grow, go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project, and help us grow to be a bigger independent voice in snowboarding. We want to bring you an organic experience that is grass fed and
Grass fed?
I have no idea.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, also, subscribe, rate, review on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on any of our podcasting platforms. That's also going to help us grow, help get the word out, and also tell your friends, right? If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends, let your snowboarding buddies know.
But also let your friends that like to grow tomatoes know, too. Just saying.
What are like the lessons that you can share that you can maybe help kids avoid who have this desire to be involved with something they love for a career? Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes maybe you made that you're like, I'll never do that again? Or what are some of the things that you're like, okay, this is, on the right track?
God, I think, in terms of like what I would tell a younger kid who's a pro athlete these days is like, save your money, right? Watch your finances, get a financial advisor if you're making enough money to do that. Invest in things you believe in, not what someone's telling you. For example, for me, it's always housing, even though there's bubbles and bubble pops and this and that. I just think housing's always good. No one ever told me that. Actually, everyone told me the opposite, right? Don't buy a house. But I think it's one of the fastest ways to financial freedom if you do it properly. And I think that the other thing is build your network and keep your, don't burn bridges. Build your network, meet as many people as you can, and never burn a bridge, dude, because you never know when you're going to need to come back and cross that bridge, and it happens, right? I think those are pretty valuable, pretty valuable points.
So look at us both here today, right?
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's nuts. I mean, Mark, we met each other in Blackcomb in like 1988, I think.
Yeah,
and
totally.
We've gone through a million phases. We worked with each other, for each other, against each other, and I never burnt your bridge, you never burnt mine, and we're going to continue to be friends. That's a perfect scenario.
Exactly, and maybe we'll ride Alaska for fun one day together again.
Absolutely, can't wait, dude.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you end up at Flow? Like, how did that happen? Because that must have been like, was there like a gap between Alliance and Flow? Like, what did you do during that time?
It pretty much went Alliance. So 2007 financial crisis, just business terms, we had 85% of our receivables unpaid. So if that means anything to anybody, it means you're not getting paid. So we closed the doors, and I had I think it was about 9 months where I was unemployed, right? Where I was in my garage, and that's network. I was talking to everybody I knew around the world. What's next? And at that time, it was doomsday, bro. It was like, it was so bad. No, it was just unfathomable. And I had 2 brand new babies at home. So it was a crazy time, right? And right around 2008, I think it was about 2008, I saw an ad on Malachi, which was for a product line manager, a brand manager for a startup company called NextBeats, which happened to have a name of a dude I know, Anthony Scaturo, on the ad, which ended up being a company underneath Flow, which was here in San Clemente. So the stars started to align. I met with them. I ended up taking the job and building that it was a face mask brand for a couple of years. But the whole time being involved in what was going on with Flow. And I think they probably knew that was a good card to play. Have Dale Rehberg in here working on face masks, but contributing to Flow or helping, right? Direct and advise. And ended up working my way into that company and having both NextBeats and Flow. And then NextBeats finally got put into Flow as its own kind of face mask accessory stuff. And then started running the marketing department at Flow and was there for, a good 7.5 or 8 years. And it's been phenomenal. What a great brand, with a great brand story. It was definitely a company that I kind of always looked at oddly, which I think is probably one of the stigmas that the company has. But being involved with it and seeing the product and what it does and how many people do love it and the benefits it does have, I was pumped. I'm like, I can't believe I'm part of this. This is killer. Let's make it cool. Let's make it accessible to everyone, cool. And, lots of great people and tons of good vibes in that company, and worked for them for 7 years. And then they were just recently purchased by Nidecker Snowboards out of Switzerland, which is, one of the oldest snowboard brands in the world.
Yep.
And I am now working for them. I'm actually a sales rep on the West Coast for those brands, Flow and Nidecker. And
that's cool.
It's a continuation of my path.
Right. And, let's talk about for a second, though, like in between being the marketing director for Flow and now being the West Coast sales rep, you actually dipped into something maybe outside of snowboarding for the first time, like SEO or I don't know. What did you do in that in between?
Yep. Yeah. So what had happened is in my marketing times at Flow, we had done a lot of deep dives and like trying to discover what the brand meant and how to grow sales and what are different avenues. And one of the things that I got very involved with was the website aspect of the business and the social media, the digital communication formats, how, what, why, like what are we doing? What makes sense these days? Mm-hmm. And I hired a company into Flow called I9 Media, which was based down here in San Diego. And we hired them in to come in and help with social media at that time. They did a phenomenal job. Then we started to have them help with website and curation of the website and content and stories and things of this. And they ended up helping the brand so much. It was a phenomenal case study, to be honest. It's just phenomenal what they did. But when Nidecker purchased Flow, my position was eliminated because they obviously have all the marketing that they need over in Switzerland, which is totally understood.
Yep.
So I started to work with I9 Media, which is a natural transition. I'd been working with them for 4 years at Flow. I knew the company. I knew what we did. And I was like, hey, let's see if we can share what was done with Flow with other brands, endemically or not endemically, to snowboarding, and try to build this. So I went over there and worked in it. And talk about an education. It was a phenomenal 9 months of amazing, learning processes and things in the digital components, and bringing companies on board. And it was great. And I still work with them today. I still do some freelance stuff with them and business development. So if there's brands out there who I look at and see who I think could potentially use their help, I can introduce them and see if it works out. Mm-hmm. But it was an amazing 9 months. And then the repping position kind of fell back into my lap. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do full time. It's where my heart's at and what I know. Right. It's what I've done forever, and it's where I'm at today.
Right. And some people would see like going from the marketing director of a company to being a sales rep as a step backwards. But I would say that your perspective is maybe a step forward.
Yeah, it's it depends. There's a lot of dependencies on that statement, right?
Yeah.
If you're a marketing director for what brand, right, versus all this and that. But sales rep positions, it's an interesting component. It's a needed entity. It may be phasing out of some brands here and there, but the bottom line is I have, years and years experience in snowboard world. I have 7 years of understanding what brands I'm selling. So it's kind of a natural transition to come in and be, Dale Rehberg walks into a snowboard shop has a hell of a lot more impact than Dale Rehberg walking into a business trying to sell them a digital package.
Right.
It's something that I do and know, and I have respect on that side, and it works, and I'm happy. And it's definitely not a step back. It's freedom, and it's really great.
You get to spend a lot more time with your kids, don't you? And you still get a paycheck.
I get to spend a lot of time with my kids. I still got my paycheck, and I work really hard when it's time to work really hard, and that's the bottom line.
So let's dive into being a dad now, because you've been a dad obviously for a number of years, and you've learned a lot of lessons from life, right? In terms of like having a career, being a professional athlete. Do you parent your kids differently than your parents parented you?
I think so, and I was a kid through the 70s, and my kids are kids through the 2010s. So obviously a heck of a lot different parenting probably going on in terms of what the kid has to deal with. But in terms of with my background as a snowboarder and a professional athlete and My wife has the same background as a professional athlete, professional snowboarder. We don't push those things upon our kids, right? Like, my parents didn't push anything on me other than maybe to go hunting, but I wasn't pushed into things. And I think that we don't do that with our kids. And I think that's a good, I guess, parenting component to anyone, right? Don't push your kids into shit. Let them figure out and evolve. Give them the opportunities to explore what it is they like, but don't push them. And we let our kids explore what they like. And my son happens to love surfing and soccer, and my daughter loves gymnastics and soccer, and that's what they do. And we're completely content. We go on snowboard trips, and it's phenomenal, right? It's great to give them that experience, to be in the mountains. I think that's a super important component to life in general, right? Outdoors, mountains. But at the same time, we live at the beach, so the mountain changed to a wave, and let them learn that way. But you know, I'm not someone to tell people how to parent by any means, but I definitely kind of work on letting my kids do as they will, just as my parents did with me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Do you push your kids in any kind of direction? Like, are you kind of riding them to do good in school, or to, you know, some kind of coaching in soccer or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with school, yes. We're both, myself and my wife are very strict with that. You know, we want.
Why are you like that, and when your parents were not like that?
I just think it's very important. You know, being educated is having a mind is something it's invaluable. So let's say my son loves soccer and becomes a famous soccer player. That's going to end at some point, like it did for me, right? That's over. But that passion doesn't need to go away. You can continue down the path, but you have to have a brain, right? You have to be smart enough to figure out what it is and do it. So we definitely push education. I wouldn't say over the top, but we want them to be successful and not fail, right? Be good students, be good people. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of like the sports that my kids do, you know, my daughter hasn't totally grasped anything 100% yet, but my son has, and it's soccer. And he loves soccer as much as I love snowboarding. So I make sure that I'm an outlier to him, right? I give him every possible avenue that he can have to succeed, right? Just whatever it may be, an extra private training or a this or that, let's do it. And if you're serious about it, you do it. As soon as you're not serious about it, we back it off, kind of deal, you know?
Right. So, okay, so your kids, do you think they're going to go to college, or do you think they're going to, you know, go try to become professional athletes, or does it really not matter?
You know what? It doesn't matter to me at this point because they're 12 and 10, so it's too early for me to even try to figure that shit out. But if college is an option for them, yeah, I want them to go to college and explore an avenue and see what they can focus on becoming. But if my daughter on a creative angle can come up with a component that works in terms of a business, and she's savvy enough to run it, there's no need for her to go to school. But I don't know that today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. So here's a perfect example. My wife and I have a small candle business called TH&R Collective, and it's a killer little candle business that we run on the side. We're trying to build it up to become something, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe my daughter can run this when she's older. So I'll show her components of it, right? Mm-hmm. How we do it, what we do, what inventory means, and these things. Things that I learned in a warehouse when I was 28, I'm teaching her at 10.
Right.
Right? So
yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm pushing anyone to do anything, but I'm giving them an opportunity.
Hey, what's up? If you like what you're hearing here on the Snowboard Project, please consider donating to us on patreon.com/the Snowboard Project. Every week you get to hear me and Mark.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, Mark's there.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project. Do it.
Patreon.com/the Snowboard Project.
I was really trying to be serious there. So.
Oh, sorry.
And so, you know, you mentioned just a couple minutes ago about how, sales repping may come to an end just as like a career path in terms of like just the internet is making direct communication with distributors a lot easier. And also people, the rise of kind of going direct. What do you think the next chapter of Dale's life looks like potentially after repping?
Gosh, man, it's a very interesting question, and it's something that I think not only me but everyone probably asks themselves. What's next? Mm-hmm. This is a very new position for me in the repping world. I have been a marketing director for many years and saw what reps do and don't do, right? So I know the weaknesses. So I think I'm not looking at what's next yet because I still haven't done what I need to do here. I think there's better ways to be a rep. Having my marketing background and my digital marketing experience, there's ways and things that I can do to make myself more valuable. Mm-hmm. And I want to work on that first and see how long it goes. But above and beyond that, man, I don't know. I'm 45 years old today. 10 years, I'm 55. If I'm still sales repping in 10 years, I'll be pumped. And maybe at that point, it's time to just move somewhere and do nothing. I don't know.
Well, retiring by 55 isn't a bad deal.
Yeah. How successful or unsuccessful I can be, right?
Right. So, what, I guess, final question, right? What mistakes have you learned from, now that you have this perspective of doing all these different jobs from warehouse to marketing director, sales rep, you have a perspective of this whole snowboard industry. What are the key mistakes that you could, like the pitfalls you can help your kids avoid?
God, I think the number one mistake that I would share with anyone, and it's not a specific mistake to any one thing, it's when your gut tells you something, you need to believe it. I think that's the number one mistake that I made, where my gut told me something and I didn't trust it and I went the other way and it was a fucking failure, or you know what I mean, or something didn't happen. I think your gut's your truth monitor, your check, and if there's smoke, there's fire, that kind of scenario. So just trusting in your own instincts and your own beliefs and educate yourself, right? And if you feel it's right to do it, just fucking do it. But make sure your gut's telling you to do it.
Right. Okay. Actually, I have one more question, and this is kind of totally aside from the rest of the interview. But there's that famous photo with a fork through your tongue. What's the story behind that? Everyone's seen that photo, right?
Can't forget it.
That's famous, right?
Can't forget it.
Yeah.
Trevor Graves, man. Thank God for Trevor Graves. The story behind that is the ride team was on a photo shoot up at Island Lake Lodge. So we were all up there, and the ride photo shoots of those days were pretty mega. Like I think we had 3 or 4 photographers, 2 filmers, and they were the dudes. Like it was Trevor Graves, Jeff Curtis, John Foster, and then it was like Ruben Sanchez who filmed for Dogger. Like it was just a big deal, right? That was what we did.
Yeah.
And Trevor one night, we all would be drinking at night and getting loose, and he pulls me aside and he's like, Dale, I had a dream, and I followed through on the dream, and I created something that I want you to see, and I want to know if you'd be interested in helping me create this project. And I'm like, whatever, dude, what is it? So he takes me upstairs, and Island Lake Lodge at the time was just one lodge with bunk beds upstairs and a couple rooms only. And we sit down in the bunk, and he pulls out this bag and he pulls out this dartboard. And he's like, here it is. And I'm like, what is it? Is it a dartboard? Like what? And it had a half circle cut out of the dartboard, like basically a half of a coffee cup cut out of the edge of the dartboard.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, dude, that's for your chin. Put your chin in there. So I held it up to my face like a pizza plate and put that on my chin. He's like, okay. He's like, you have your tongue pierced. I want to put a fork through your tongue into the dartboard. And I'm like, what? So he pulls out the fork and he goes, take your tongue ring out, stab the fork through your tongue onto the dartboard, and I'm going to take a picture. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. And the fork had been modified, so worked really nicely on what I needed to do. And he literally put the fork through my tongue piercing, jammed it into my tongue, jammed it into the dartboard. And then I had to sit there holding this dartboard up with my tongue stuck to the dartboard underneath this little lamp. We had aluminum foil all around it so it was lit right. And Trevor's like genius photographer, which I'm sure most of you know. He had like built this one crazy camera that he would bring around with him.
The Misty Cam.
He's like the Misty Cam, you know.
Yeah.
It sat on one leg and it had this, like, you put a cape over his head and it would just take these crazy ass pictures, right? So he sets that thing up and he runs a couple Polaroids through it, and I'm looking at the pictures and I'm just like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that was the end of it. So he took those pictures, and I think somehow someone at Sony Enterprises saw the pictures. Okay, this is before it was published, before Ride used them. It was probably part of Trevor's thought process. Hey, I want to send this around and see what kind of reaction I can get. Because at that time, dude, people didn't have their tongues pierced, and that wasn't happening, right?
Yep.
And Sony had shown interest in using that photo as the first box cover of the Sony PlayStation when it came out. That's what it was. It was like almost there.
Really?
And it got to the final like review, and it got shut down. So what happened was that was Ride's photo shoot. Mm-hmm. Trevor couldn't sell them that photo, so I met Trevor in San Francisco a couple months later, and we recreated the shot for Sony.
Really?
And it almost made it, yeah. So there's two versions of that shot. I don't know if I've ever seen the other one or not, but that's the story behind it. And I think at one point it was going to be on the cover of Snowboarder magazine. At one point it was going to be this, that, but Ride ended up using it with their Ride campaign. What was it? Ride More, Talk Less, which is just genius, right?
Yep.
And they ran with it, and it's forever with me.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing, Dale. That was a great story. And I actually, having known you since I was 14, 15 years old, I learned a lot about you just by talking to you and asking you some questions.
Buddy. Well, I'm back at you, Mark. I appreciate the time, and good luck with everything, dude.
Cool. Well, I don't think luck will have much to do with it. It's going to be hard work on my case. So.
Yeah. Get after it.
There may be bad luck involved, but I don't think there's going to be good luck.
Well, I'm sure you'll be a success, dude. You always do.
Cool. Well, thanks, Dale. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. I'll be in touch, Mark.
All right, cool. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See ya.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.